Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, September 9th, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, reminding you that in just a little over 2 months, on November 17th, we will be having our annual commentary roast here in New York City, our annual fundraiser, our annual get-together with the commentary community and like-minded people. And we are this year roasting in the wake of such luminaries as Ben Shapiro, Mayor Soloveichik, Dan Senor, Charles Krauthammer, Dick Cheney, Joe Lieberman, my father, my mother, Roger Hertog, and others. We will be roasting Natan Sharansky, the greatest living Jewish hero. How do you do that? Come to New York and find out. Go to commentary.org/roast for details. November 17th here in New York City. And you will, if you do come, meet there my colleagues today, among them executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
So the entire world of granular political lunatics, among whom I count myself, was shocked and stunned and horrified and thrilled and all kinds of things by the New York Times Siena poll yesterday that found that the race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is a 1-point race in which Trump now holds the lead 48-47. And why, after 40 years or 50 years of polling, studying, and discussion and all of that, we even still refer to a 1-point lead as a lead when we are told every single time we read an article about a poll that because of margins of error, something like a 1-point lead does not exist. There is no such thing as a 1-point lead. That 1-point lead could be as much as a 4-point lead or a 2-point or a 3-point being behind. That's what margins of error tell you. All you know is that when they ask 1,000 people, a couple more people say that they're going to vote for Trump than vote for Harris. And when you add it all up, it adds up to a point, and therefore, you get a Trump lead. So it's not really a lead. The race is tied. Yet the fact that the race is tied is clearly a very important piece of data. Matt, why is it an important piece of data?
It is an important piece of data.
No, but I mean, why right now do you think specifically that just saying, okay, like all the polls in the last month, in fact, all the polls, with the exception of the 3-month period in which America became convinced, it became clear to America that Joe Biden was cognitively impaired, has shown this since January 2023. Democrat, Republican, 1 point keeps shifting between Trump and Biden.
Close
Biden,
race.
Trump,
I mean,
okay.
The race has always been slightly different among the battleground states than it is nationally. You can say nationally this race has been consistently close even before the June 27th debate between Biden and Trump. But at that time, remember, Trump had solid leads in the battleground states. And he had leads outside the margin of error in the Sun Belt swing states of North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. So the race has changed. It's now moved to a place where nationally it is a toss-up. And in the states, in those battleground states, it is also a toss-up. So Harris has made the race more competitive in the battlegrounds. However, I think one reason that the political community was shocked and much of it dismayed by the New York Times Siena poll is that it confirmed a sense that many of us had, a sense that Harris's momentum had stalled. And what we have is that Harris had an incredible burst of enthusiasm. She unified Democratic voters. She is like Scrooge McDuck in the money bin, just swimming in all of the campaign cash that she's accumulated. And she did make the race competitive at the state level and opened up some new paths, actually, to 270 by making Georgia and North Carolina toss-up states. But it seems to be slowing. The momentum seems to be slowing. And on the eve of the debate tomorrow, September 10th, the first meeting ever of Trump and Harris, we have a race that is really too close to call, but it's too close to call in a way that I think favors Trump. I really do, because throughout this campaign, a few things have been happening. One is Trump is more popular than he's ever been, which is remarkable. And he's been running better than he was running in 2016 or 2020 in the polling. Both those things continue to be the case. And with Harris, the question was always, look, because she's a new candidate, does that mean we have a new election? And I think for about a month there, many people thought it does mean we have a new election. She's kind of taken the board and scrambled it, and Trump doesn't know what to do. And Democrats it's brat summer, and they're wearing that disgusting shade of green that goes with the Charlie XCOYZD album. But now we've come up out of our Labor Day festivities, and we see that actually maybe it's still the same race. And it's the same race that's about Joe Biden being one of the worst presidents in American history. And most people, most undecided voters, thinking it's time for a change.
So that was the most revealing. That was the most revealing part of the poll. I thought was that voters still associate her with the Biden administration, and that was what. To quote the
imagine
obviously,
that.
No, but I mean, that is a hilarious thing.
So it was
said.
funny that the Times headline was great. New poll suggests Harris's support has stalled after a euphoric August. So we'd gone from joy to pure euphoria, and now they're crashing down to earth. But the fact that she is now being linked to her own record is a good thing for Trump, as Matt said. I spent some time looking at her supposed policy statement website that she's put up. There's really no policy there, and there's actually no answer to the very important questions about her immigration policy, fracking, all the stuff that people, the economy. She's 100% behind the results of the Inflation Reduction Act. So she's not really backing down from any of the policies that link her to that administration. So it's a good thing that the press has finally caught on to this reality.
You know, the argument that we've been having, that Matt and I have been having, or the Abe really and I have been having since Harris emerged, was this question of how long could she hide, right? Could she give an interview? Could she this? Could she that? So she now gave one interview. Note, by the way, she gave the interview and it worked perfectly in this sense, which is that where is the entire Washington press corps saying, Vice President Harris, we're over here. Like
they're reporting on her spice preferences.
One of the newsletters, I think it was Semaphore this morning, said, well, you know, Harris and Walz have been giving more interviews lately. And so I clicked on the link that they provided for evidence of this, and the link went to the single interview Walz gave to the far left NPR station where he made those terrible, awful comments about Israel. Right. So I don't think they're really coming out of their shells.
No, but I'm just saying, so she did the interview, and somehow it's going to be like, okay, she did that interview, that's fine. We're just here to get her elected. We're not even going to pretend that we're not here to get her elected. Do whatever you think is best, right? All of that. But I think that there is there's a real flea in the ointment, or there is something which is, if she doesn't put meat on the bones of her candidacy, it all defaults to the Biden record. In other words, like, it's one thing for her to have have a spokesman come out and say she now supports fracking, or another thing for someone can come out and say she's still for plastic straws, or, she isn't against plastic straws anymore, stuff like that. But that's not real. That's all kind of a kind of smoke or vapor. And so when you say, what does she stand for? And Trump says she stands for the Inflation Reduction Act. Whoever says it, it's the default, because it is what her record has been for the last 4 years. This was, I think, inevitably going to happen with her silence. If she wants to try to establish positions that will separate her from Biden, particularly on the economy, she has to do it. she sort of did it in this weird, not real way that I think maybe backfired by saying she was now for a capital gains rate of 28%, whereas the Biden position was a capital gains rate of 39.6%. That still represented a 40% increase over the current capital gains rate. So she is now on the record in her first major economic statement calling for a 40% increase in the capital gains tax rate. Not good, Bob. That's not I mean, people want rich people to be taxed more, I guess, all things being equal. But if the only thing we know about her on taxes is she's for a 40% tax increase, she better go out there and start doing cleanup, right? So one way or the other, she's either going to run on the Biden record or she's going to run on a new record that she starts creating or new promises she's going to start creating, because there's no third way, because the vapor is starting to evanesce.
What's surprising me is that the diversity of fluff in her campaign is so sparse. Like, we're still on her recipes and her spices. Yeah, this is a long
to the spice store.
I mean,
we got to talk about the
was
spices.
she cooking in the hotel in
spices.
Pittsburgh where she's been? Is that why she needed the spices?
So
did she get one of those?
I mean,
by the way,
family
No, the spice store is an interesting story. But
this all resulted, by the way, in a hilarious thing yesterday where Alex Thompson, the journalist, he said the Harris campaign wrote in an email that she does not support an electric vehicle mandate. So Alex Thompson asked the campaign, does that mean she would veto the bill she co-sponsored in 2019 with such a mandate for manufacturers? Would she veto or sign the bill she co-sponsored? The campaign declined to comment. So it's gotten to sort of hilarious lengths where she's sponsored bills that she is now sort of disavowing and leaving people wondering whether she would veto the bills that she's sponsored. I think this is where it gets really complicated for her, because I think at some point it starts looking ridiculous. Remember, Kerry's I was for it before I was against it sort of thing is a monument to ridiculousness, to the, it's silly. And whether true or not, it's silly and looked at as one of those moments. I think that she's in danger of starting to look kind of ridiculous, not just, wait a second, I don't know exactly where she stands on electric vehicle mandates, but more importantly, she starts getting a reputation as someone who is cartoonish about what we don't know.
Can I make a point about the debates? Because Harris has not given...
debate.
I'm sorry.
Would be
yes,
debate.
That's right. The debate, the singular debate that we're going to have, along
one
with the
interview, one debate,
exactly, and then we'll vote.
One spice,
multiple spice, and then I saw her carrying Doritos too. Was that from this weekend, or was that?
They better be flaming hot.
She
Doritos.
loves Doritos. This is her. I'm in touch with the people. Yes, she always.
Oh, that's right. I learned that from the New York Times editorial. Right. We talked about
really
on the
cracked
podcast
behind the scenes
ago.
reporting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about debate prep. It is possible, especially when you are the incumbent, to become over-prepared for a debate. And so I'm hearing all these stories about how Harris is squirreled away in the hotel in Pittsburgh. She has a stage. She has this person in a Trump suit doing a Trump imitation. She's trying to learn her lines. I assume she's trying to prep some lines or stories along the same pattern that she used in her first debate in the Democratic primary in 2019, when she had that attack on Biden for busing. But there's a danger here, and that is when incumbent presidents have their first debate, they do terribly. And of course, none did worse than Joe Biden, who ended his candidacy and effectively his presidency with his first debate. And I wonder,
listen, you should really put an exclamation point on this, because this is true throughout my lifetime. Okay, I mean, we're going back 44 years. Okay, Carter bungles the 1984 debate. Reagan bungles the 1980. Carter 1980. Reagan
80.
bungles the 1984.
The first debate in 84, right?
Okay, so not 88 is an open debate because that's Bush versus
Dukakis.
Bush. H.W. Bush bungles the first debate in 92, looks at his watch. Maybe Clinton didn't bungle the 96 debate because
Clinton
there was nothing
Dole,
to bungle.
so, right.
Okay. Bush 2004 bungles the first debate with Kerry,
Right.
and Obama 2012
Yes.
bungles the first debate.
One of the highlights of my life.
Romney. Yes.
Night. Yeah.
It was an amazing experience. That
I had
debate.
hope there
And
for a
yes,
moment. Yeah.
There was a moment of hope. And then, of course, Trump bungles the debate with Biden when Biden finally gets the opening to say, "Will you just shut up,
Yes.
man?" Which is
The
the
yelling.
thing that Americans had wanted. A bunch of Americans had wanted
Make
someone
the
to say to
yelling
Trump
stop.
for 4 years. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is really true. Now, she's not the incumbent, and Biden, of course, the ultimate. So, but she's kind of the incumbent, but
She's
she's not,
kind of
but
the incumbent, and she's stuck in this trap, as you've been laying out, John, where she kind of has to introduce herself to the public. What the takeaway for me from the Times Siena poll that got everyone talking this weekend is many voters, especially many voters who are undecided, still don't really know much about her. And so the campaign convention, which was a successful convention, and her speech, which seems to have been a successful speech. I didn't like it, but most people seem to have liked it. That didn't do enough to make people feel reassured that Kamala Harris can be the commander-in-chief of the United States.
Well, and something else that's undermining her is that when she's asked specifically, as we've noted, a campaign spokesperson or a behind the scenes person answers. She doesn't answer directly. But I've noticed that they've said, she doesn't need actually to give you her complicated policy plans. It's her values that matter. It's her values that matter.
Right.
The problem is then her surrogates like Bernie Sanders go on TV and say, you know what, she'll basically say anything to get elected. And that's what's important.
And her values are mine, are Bernie Sanders values.
That's exactly right. So she's like, she wants to be the coy mistress, but she's turning into scary.
And also
spice.
Dick Cheney's. Bernie Sanders will say her
Right.
values are my values, which are the same as
Did
Dick
you
Cheney's
just
values.
go from Andrew Marvel to the Spice Girls?
I did, and you all did not appreciate
that is a
Done.
great moment in the commentary
or a very low moment.
podcast
Culture.
history. Low high moment. I am awash in gratitude and enthusiasm for that.
But all this really could conceivably set the stage for the over preparation situation that Matt describes, because if her campaign is aware that the story is they don't know who you are, they don't understand the switcheroos on a billion policies, you haven't given any details, this could really sort of be a moment of over cramming for her.
It
Could be.
It could. So what we don't really know is how good her people are. And I mean this, okay, I think what's happened over the last month with the money and everything like that is a natural manifestation of an explosion of relief at the dark corner into which Democrats realized over the course of 2024 that they had painted themselves, or maybe throughout the Biden presidency, by making it impossible for anybody to primary him, by changing the primary rules to make sure that New Hampshire could not pose a challenge to him, doing all of these things to smooth the way for somebody who could not run for president or be president, and that they had done this to themselves, and that they were in this trap in the labyrinth, and they got out of it. And she's raised $500 million because people are like, oh, thank God. So and they had a good convention, all that. So we attribute this to, look, these are the best. These are the best of the best. These are pros. They know what they're doing, and they're really good. Do we really know that they're very, very good? We'll know tomorrow night in some ways. I think that the strategy that they've pulled out of here, which is she should never talk, I don't think that's a good strategy. I don't
your
think
face.
that ever was a good strategy unless you have literally no confidence in the can. So
Here's
it's
what
like
we know.
Like
we know that they're fighting. We know that there are tensions in the Harris camp. There's tensions between Harris's close advisors, the advisors that eventually rose to the top, amidst all of that turnover in her office for the first year. She has her close advisors. Then there is the Biden team. It's still in Wilmington, right? Jen O'Malley Dillon is still technically the campaign manager in Delaware. You know, what connection does Kamala Harris have to Delaware? None, except, she works for Joe Biden, the president of the United States. Then there's the Obama team, the David Plouffe team, right? Stephanie Cutter, that whole crew is back. And we have some reporting, not a lot, because much of the press is engaged in trying to boost Kamala Harris. But we do have some reporting that says there are tensions, there are disagreements over messaging, and she's in the middle of it. So
right.
What will that produce? We'll have to see.
So,
we should say she added late last night a policy page to her website.
Yeah, but
Christine mentioned that. Yeah.
It's not
so I mean,
very detailed.
There's at least something.
It looks like ChatGPT generated most of the answers, to be honest.
Yes, it does.
And that's perfect. Okay, so what I'm saying is that there is a kind of sense of, okay, the grown-ups are now in charge. You don't have Biden. They know what they're doing. That very much has been the message among Democrats. They're relieved. The organization's working, there are enthusiastic crowds at whatever rallies they do and all of that. And I think that what's happened over the last month, not only with the money, but with the polling, is as long as she didn't stumble and fall face first into a pile of mud, the race reestablished itself where it would always have been had Biden not been mentally infirm, which is, I think, how Matt started the podcast. It's a jump ball tie race, the closest race we have ever seen. Harry Enton, our friend on CNN, says it is the closest presidential race in 60 years. That would be, or 64 years. That would be Nixon, Kennedy. And that's where it ought to have been without the exogenous factor of Biden's infirmity, let's say. Or Biden's infirmity was that exogenous factor, and Trump's legal troubles was that exogenous factor, and there they both are. And I just don't know that what we're seeing here with the stalling of her momentum and all of that isn't the net result of a strategy that isn't working.
I want to say something about the landscape, though, because you're right. This election was going to be about issues, in my view. The main issue is the economy, inflation, and prices. That is still the main issue in the election.
By the way, by 25%.
Right.
Economy is in the 40s and immigration is in the low 20s, and
the Democrats are in charge. The Democrats are in charge. That was the gaslighting of the DNC, was the attempt by every single speaker, including the candidate, Kamala Harris, to convince America that actually Donald Trump is the president of the United States and Republicans are in charge of the Congress, when in fact Republicans just have the House by the narrowest margin, right? So the Democrats are in charge. The first issue, inflation, economy, that hurts the incumbent party. The second issue has been the border. That hurts the incumbent party because their policies are responsible for this huge wave of migration, legal and illegal, that the United States has been going through for the past 4 years. Third issue, abortion. Okay, that's the issue that favors the incumbent party. But I think there's a sleeper issue, John, and it's coming out. It came out a couple weeks ago, and it's coming out again today with this new report from the House Committee on Afghanistan and the Gold Star families coming to Congress. And that is national security, and in particular, what happened in Afghanistan in 2021. Let's not forget, it was the American withdrawal from Afghanistan and the disaster that followed with the death of our 13 servicemen and just the awful scenes from the Kabul International Airport. That's when Biden's approval went underwater. That's when he fell below 50%, and he has never recovered since. And Harris is tied to that policy. She continues to say that she was the last person in the room when Biden made that decision against the advice of the generals. She continues to support the policy. And what we saw over the fight, what we saw in the fight over Trump's visit to Arlington National Cemetery was a proxy battle for this central issue. So I think this is another issue that favors the out party here in this election where, maybe it wasn't about Biden's mental incapacity after all. Maybe it was about these more fundamental issues, 3 out of 4 of which favor the challenger.
This is an important point because not to again to play, you know, Mr. Recent History brain, but foreign policy after the 1980s like wasn't an issue, right? And it was always a weird issue. It was very important, but it also wasn't. If you polled it, people didn't talk that much about it. So it was always brought up in weird side contexts. It's morning in America, there's a bear in the woods, we need to fight the bear in the woods. But you wouldn't say like what Reagan did on the SALT II treaty was with, you know, the SALT II treaty. What about the medium range missiles in Europe? Nobody was debating the specifics of it.
But you had Dukakis in the tank. It was more imagistic, right?
Right. Okay, but that's the point that I want to bring up, which is that in 2004, Iraq was the most controversial issue. We were at war in Iraq. It was the most controversial issue in America, and Americans were getting increasingly annoyed by the restraints put on the country by the effort to fight terrorism. TSA, you know, speech stuff like that. And George W. Bush was underwater on foreign policy in August. And beginning right around now, so Wednesday is September 11th. So that would have been 3 years, the anniversary of 3 years after September 11th. Beginning in September, Bush made 4 major speeches and highlighted at his rallies the fight against terrorism and 9/11. And that's how he won the 2004 election. Now, granted, 9/11, Iraq, those are much bigger direct issues 3 years after 9/11, and the fact that we actually had an ongoing war in 2 places than foreign policy is now. But the point is that you can awaken the American people to issues like this if you have a hook, or you have to say, here's why I did Bush positively, here's why I did what I did. Remember what happened. Remember that you liked how I reacted. Look at this guy over here. Do you think he's going to react in the right way to similar controversies? And he turned the election around and won the election. Now, Trump is in an interesting position here because I heard over the weekend that the Biden team and spokesmen and people like that are saying things like, Biden inherited a disaster in Afghanistan from Trump, and he did something about it. And this is a huge opening for Trump if he can figure out how to use it. Because the story of Trump was no different from Biden. Trump wanted to get America out of Afghanistan. And he told his team, Zalmay Khalilzad, and get us out. I want us out. We're getting out. And they would come back and say, we can't get, remember, he was going to have the Taliban at Camp David in order to seduce them into getting out of Afghanistan.
I think Camp David was the compromise. I think he wanted them the White House first, and then they said Camp David, and then they said, "Oh, actually, let's just cancel the trip."
Right. And also Trump's base is again pretty lit up on not getting involved in foreign conflicts. Like that's the thing that animates the people he doesn't want to lose on his side again this year.
But I'm going in a slightly different place. What Trump can say is, I wanted to pull out of Afghanistan, but you know what? It wasn't safe. We couldn't do it in a way that would protect American interests, protect our troops, and do this. And so though this was my main thing, when my people came to me and said, we have this X, Y, and Z problem, I said, okay, I guess we got to wait until after the election that I'm going to win, and then maybe we'll be in a better position to do this. But Trump is on record, has a record of having wanted to pull out of Afghanistan and not having done it responsibly. Now, I am not a fan of the way Trump has talked about Afghanistan, how he talks about it now. I don't like it. But the fact remains, he didn't do it, and Biden did it, and he wanted to do it, and he didn't do it.
This is Patrick Ruffini's great point, remember, which is that Biden has actually had Trump's second term, because all of the bad consequences of things that Trump started at the end of his first term have manifested themselves in Biden's first term. And because Biden's first term is actually Trump's second term, Trump may actually get a second term that would be kind of like a do-over first term.
Anyway, I'm just saying that what I'm saying is it's a kind of it's not that complicated an argument.
It's a needle that he's not going to thread, right? I mean, but
it's not that much of a needle if you think about it. He could say, you know what? Biden was right to want to get out of Afghanistan. You know how I know? Because it was my idea. It was my idea we had to get enough. It was enough. And we had enough. And I had people for 4 years working to get us out of Afghanistan, and we couldn't do it safely yet. And then Biden just pulls everybody out. 13 servicemen die. He doesn't even care. Kamala hasn't even met these families. I will go to their grave sites. They love me. They hate him. They hate her, because I, in the end, was the person who was willing to sacrifice my desiderata to protect their beloved family member.
That, to me, is the stronger response.
But that's not a needle.
He had but the families is the stronger response, because he had those ads ready to go when they released them after Kamala, very stupidly, I think, and I think we all probably think, blundered into the Arlington Cemetery fight. He had several of those families on camera ready to go, and it was clear that those were, at some point they were going to be used. I think that's a stronger. First of all, I think that it's just a more Trumpy angle to go in, because it's so visual, because it's so representative, because he was going to stand with people in a cemetery with flags behind him, and that's very Trump, and he's comfortable doing that. But also because he doesn't have to explain it at all. What he's done here is he's deputized mourning, grieving families to make that point for him, and they're much better at it. So I think that that's the road to go down, which is just, they blew it. Look what they left behind.
Well,
have to talk about, what I would have done or whatever. He's just going to let these families.
But you know what? He can't talk about what aspect he would have a genuine problem talking about. It's the fact that the Taliban's gender apartheid is ramping up. Quickly, it has been without us there.
Yeah.
They've issued all sorts of new restrictions on girls and women. This is after Biden said, we'll still be watching. We're going to.
Taliban are who we thought they were.
Yeah.
Well, but Harris also has a challenge here. So far, I mean, she is considered weak on foreign policy. She's done this. She's trying to do an image conscious thing where she, releases images of her and, the recent hostage release, her and Blinken in the Situation Room. After the president released his own images, she released hers on social media. But I noticed something about the upcoming 9/11 anniversary. Last year, President Biden was at an Alaskan military base, and he commemorated it that way. This year, they are sending him, I believe, to Ground Zero and to Shanksville to lay wreaths. So Harris is obviously aware that she needs some more, I care about the military or I care about national security images. She's using him as a surrogate, which is risky in its own right.
Well, I think she'll be with him.
Yes, she's with him at some of them. So I think that shows that she understands she has an image problem.
Someone give her a megaphone. Someone give her a megaphone so she can have a megaphone moment.
But this is where in the debate, she's going to have to say something that reassures the American people she knows what she's talking about.
Do we think that Walz is kind of falling a bit flat on the military stuff was the attempt at that, and it didn't work, and now they're sort of floundering on that?
I don't know. I think situationally they thought, oh, this is great. He's in the National Guard, so that'll be nice. That'll be helpful. We can't pick the Jew from Pennsylvania, so this is great. And and he brings this, and then it turned out that basically this has now been neutralized by his troubles. But I doubt that they came up with a whole theory of the case that he was going to be her blocking tackle on military matters. It was too fast, I think. But let me just pull back for a moment and talk to you guys about NetSuite from Oracle today. what does the future hold for business? You ask 9 experts, you'll get 10 answers. There's a bull market, there'll be a bear market, rates rise or fall, inflation up or down. Does anybody have a crystal ball? No. So until you know what's actually happening, over 38,000 businesses have found it helpful to future-proof their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions with real insight, real-time insight, forecasting. You're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books on days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. Until then, over 38,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/commentary. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/commentary, netsuite.com/commentary. Now, I want to talk to you about the liberal bubble, because I think this is a very important aspect of why it's hard for people like Harris and the media and stuff to understand where they might not be going right or wrong, because the feedback loop is so insistently positive. And it has to do with this appearance that she made at this store, this spice shop in Pittsburgh. An appearance where the people who run the spice shop got all upset about the divisions in America, and they were crying. And then Harris said there will be a better day. There's going to be a better day. And like my friend Mike Murphy, the Republican political strategist and a wonderful guy, and I hate to make fun of him now, but I have to make a little fun of him now, said, look, finally, here we are, somebody with empathy, like a candidate with empathy. Imagine that. So let's talk about the advance work that led Kamala Harris to the spice shop, because this was no ordinary spice shop, Penzeys Spices in Pittsburgh. It is a left-wing, radical, hysterical spice shop. And I'm not joking when I say this, because on its website, it has an entire section with thousands of words attacking Republicans.
Is there any other kind of spice shop?
I don't know.
I don't go to spice shops, but I just imagine they'd kind of be lefty.
I've never really heard of. I mean, every spice shop I can think of.
They bought pro-impeachment Facebook ads during Trump's presidency. They were highly politically active. They're a known entity. If you're conservative, you've heard of them. Maybe not.
So Fox News's Jasmine Bayer has written an absolutely hilarious piece about this. So on their website, so she says, Harris says, it's time to turn the page on the divisiveness, time to bring our country forward, chart a new way forward. People are exhausted about the division and the attempts to divide us as Americans. So the Penzeys Spice Shops website has an About Us section, like websites of businesses have, which has 360 words. There's also a section called About Republicans, and that has 850 words. And I will now read some of the 850 words.
Lot more detail than Kamala's policy section.
CEO Bill Penzy informs Republicans they can shop elsewhere. Quote, going forward, we would still be glad to have you as customers, but we're done pretending the Republican Party's embrace of cruelty, racism, COVID lies, climate change denial, and threats to democracy are anything other than the risks they legitimately are. If you need us to pretend, you are not creating the hurt you are creating in order for you to continue to be our customer. I'm sad to say you might be happier elsewhere. Okay? That's not normal. That's not a normal thing to have on a small business's website. And of course, that's
you like some hate with your oregano? I mean, it's insane.
That's why people in the Harris campaign knew about Penzeys Spices. They're not like, we need to find a really good small business in Pittsburgh. You know, there's a really interesting spice shop. It's so colorful and interesting, and the people are really lovely. Let's go there. Someone's like, man, I love that Penzeys Spices. Have you ever seen that About Republicans section? and they didn't know what they
It's
were
so
walking
funny
into.
too, because in her economic speech last week in New Hampshire, she made a big deal about how she loves small businesses because they create community. And you
Yeah.
know, you go into a small business and the person recognizes who you are, and you know,
Yeah.
you go to a small business and they're going to ask you, you know, how are things going? How are your kids? How's your marriage? And when I heard it at the time, I was like, I don't want anyone in a small business to ask me about my kids or my marriage. What is, you know, but of course, when she's
By the
saying
way,
that, she's
how's
thinking
your
of this
marriage?
place. Yeah, she's
How's
thinking,
your marriage?
she's thinking this
Crazy.
place. She's thinking the spice shop going, you know, show me your party registration. And if you're a Republican, get the hell out of here. That's
But
the
that she
community
went
she
there
wants.
to communicate a message of unity and an end to divisiveness. And here you have one of the very few small businesses in the country that you could probably find that is hysterically dedicated to divisiveness, exclusivity,
Okay,
and,
but
and extreme attacks on ugly attacks on people with whom they disagree.
okay, so we know this, and it is hilarious. But you know what is flooding TikTok and other social media is little clips of her giving people hugs. Like she's giving out random hugs in Pittsburgh. She's actually hugging DNC volunteers. I mean, she's hugging basically her own staff, and they're weeping. And but that image that rockets around social media, that's going to get a lot more eyeballs on it than any knowledge of, you know, weird spice companies, I'm afraid to report.
So let's play that out a little bit. Is that what she needs politically?
I don't
Doesn't
think so.
she
I
need
think-
white males? Doesn't she
Yeah.
need white males? Do white males want to watch videos of Kamala Harris, TikToks of Kamala Harris?
She has
hugging?
been leading on the question of who cares most about people like you, and it's a narrow lead. And so I think that the efforts to portray her as a, you know, empathetic and friendly, that's trying to boost that number up. One of those attributes where she's doing better than Trump, but there's still room for her to improve. And you know, that question, who cares more about people like you, that's pretty decisive. And
Right.
one of Trump's strengths, actually, especially in 2016, was that he really narrowed the Democratic advantage on that issue.
Yeah.
Because of his populism, because of his, you know, his weird authenticity. Right? He's so fake, he's authentic.
He also succeeded in convincing people that they, Hillary and the Blob and the Democrats, do not care about people like you.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's not even so much that he cared about people like you, but that they really didn't, and they really, really, really didn't.
Well, and that message lands when you can't pay your grocery bill at the end of the month.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, that's
sure.
the.
And this is where Trump's you know, less attractive qualities can actually come in and help him a bit, because he's one of the things that he's been angriest about and most resentful of his whole adult life is the fact that he made this money and he's still not accepted in high society, right? He's still not part of the club. He's still looked at as a sort of grotesquerie, you know, circus attraction or whatever. And that has resonated in a way that you can feel it. You can see that you believe him, that he's like, he's got as much money as all these rich people, but he's not part of that club. And that not part of that club has set in and helped him. And despite, you know, the gold toilets, whatever it is, he resonates with resentment that he's not part of that club, and it's worked.
Abe, one thing I did want to point out also in terms of messages that the Harris people are retailing, or that the Democrats have been retailing, that I think are self-defeating. I mean, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just the theory. But so guess what happened this weekend? News stories coming out. I know. I don't want you to fall out of your chair with surprise and shock. But apparently there probably isn't going to be a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel. Really, you got to look at it and say, you know, they tried and tried. It's just not going to happen. I know you were I know you were counting on it. I know you thought it was going to happen. So I hate to be the deliverer of these bad tidings that there is not going to be a ceasefire deal with people who just went out and shot 6 hostages in the head after having them in a torture chamber for 311 days and all of that. Okay.
Well,
Who is it that is retailing how there needs to be a ceasefire deal? We got to get it done. There has to be one. Who looks weak by saying we needed a ceasefire deal and we didn't get one? Not Trump. Trump doesn't look, it's not his rhetoric. Who bets on this? Why were they betting on this? What is that about? And how you want to add another foreign policy failure to them? That their main policy here, which is to get a ceasefire deal, has now died
it's not
again?
even. It's not even that she looks weak exactly because of this. It's the only thing she has to say on the topic, right? And it's falling apart. Now, I'm not convinced this is the last round of, oh, we're coming close to another deal. There have been so many. I'm not convinced that this is really the last time we're going to hear that from the U.S. from the American administration, if for no other reason because the Biden administration, I think, has run out of gas on this completely.
But also, most importantly, Biden still thinks there's a ceasefire to be had. That was my takeaway from this new round of reporting. Biden's national security team is back channeling to their favorite reporters that, oh boy, we hit a big wall because this group Hamas, like, they're genocidal, psychopathic murderers, and they don't actually want a deal.
It's hard to do
of course,
that.
our president is still in the same reporting saying, "Well, I still think there's a chance. Let's work harder. Let's get."
I don't think he believes
it's the
it.
Dumb and Dumber chance.
Right.
It's the Dumb and Dumber chance, right? The conversation between Lauren Holly and Jim Carrey, where he says, is there a chance? It's like 1 in a million. And
I think he still, I do think he believes it, Abe. I mean, when in his moments of, lucidity, because think about what our CIA director said in an appearance over the weekend with his counterpart in the United Kingdom. He said, well, at first in 2022, I took Vladimir Putin's threats of using a tactical nuclear weapon seriously. But now I'm looking at it, and in truth, a lot of this escalation language coming from Putin is kind of, it's not worth taking seriously. Okay, well, then why are you still limiting the ranges of the weapons we have given to Ukraine so that they can't hit the Russian airfields that are doing so much damage? I know why. It's because Biden is still captive to this de-escalation concept. It's Biden who was always determined to remove our troops from Afghanistan, whatever the cost. And it's Biden who is still determined to get a ceasefire with Hamas, even though Hamas has no interest in agreeing to a ceasefire.
So let's go back to. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think, Matt, you're totally correct that this comes from Biden. And I think he is genuinely he's like petrified of Putin, to be honest, and of Russia. And that's hobbled our policy the whole time. I do think also that the ceasefire insistence also comes from Biden. But I don't think it's because he thinks it can happen. I think it's because he doesn't know what else to do on it and never has.
And I think, by the way, we should also say that they just sanctioned Sinwar while saying there's still a deal possible. Like the Justice Department gives
really
going to
make Sinwar think twice.
Yeah, the Justice Department gives this big speech saying
the arrest warrant.
The Justice Department has a long memory. And so it's like the other things in this administration where you
let's put FBI agent Burt Macklin on the case.
Yeah. But you've had like these two things that coexist somehow in their heads, where they're like, no, we understand that Hamas are barbarians, and no one knows that better than us. No one says that more often than us. So let's see what Sinwar's next offer is.
Just to go back to playing, Mr. Easy, cheap history guy once again, and analogizing this election to an election that does not resemble all that much, but if we find ourselves in the situation where Humphrey is running for president in 1968 and he's got Johnson's Vietnam policy sitting there, that he can neither separate himself from nor run on and wants to run away from. And by the way, this is at a time when the country had not yet fully turned on the war. It really hadn't. But he had his own party to deal with. He had, revolts inside the party and all of that. So there he is standing there. Well, so Harris, once again, Harris has to stand there with Afghanistan it's a complicated story, but Afghanistan in a sort of new position, or newish position, things changing in the war that the administration has very little to say about, although Burns did say, boy, they really did pretty well in Kursk. It's kind of staggering how well the Ukrainians did in Kursk. And then we have the memory of Afghanistan, and then we have what's going on in the Middle East. And Humphrey was paralyzed on these central issues because he had no room to maneuver. And he needed to maneuver, and there was nowhere for him to go. And he had a president. He was the vice president of somebody who had basically said, "I'm out. Like, I don't know what to do either. That's why I'm not even running for another term, because you guys, this is whatever. I'm done." And Harris, again, if this stuff has any overhang on the way voters are going to make decisions, that redounds to Trump. Like, where's the positive? Biden pulled out of Afghanistan with the idea that he would run again in 2024 as a peacemaker, as the guy who had ended the forever war. It was over. And now they can't do that because because of the haunting results of ending the forever war meant that there are forever wars elsewhere that are frightening to people.
Yeah, and just recently, the United States engaged in a major anti-ISIS operation, and we cleared out a lot of ISIS leaders in Syria. And what was crucial to that operation? American forces on the ground. So the consequences of Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan have not fully materialized. We mentioned earlier in the podcast about how the Taliban is reimposing its radical view of Sharia law and basically turning women into non-entities in Afghanistan once again. But what did they do after that? Well, they started destroying all the religious relics. And then what did they do after that? They started launching attacks and being a safe harbor for terrorist groups launching attacks against the West. And we already have plots emerging. And we should mention, too, this Pakistani national who was apprehended over the weekend, crossing from Canada, who was determined to kill as many Jews as possible in New York on the anniversary of October 7th. So this is what happens when you leave these places where the jihadists and the terrorists are at work. And that too, is part of Biden's legacy.
We've been sort of here and there on the commentary recommends, and Seth has a commentary recommends I want him to get to, but before he does, I'm going to do a quick multi-recommend because I actually, for the first time in ages, watched some new television and new streaming television, and I watched 3 or 4 things that were good, as opposed to every time I turn something new on and I'm like, this is terrible, and I stop watching it. And so they're all first episodes, so I don't feel comfortable saying, "Oh, it's really going to be great." But of course, but I thought it would be worth, because people really like the streaming recs, because that's something they can like pull up. So the first is the first episode of the 4th season of Slow Horses, maybe the best show on television. The show about disgraced British MI5 agents who have been put in this rubber room place where they're supposed to go do no harm until they retire, led by Gary Oldman. And so in this season, again, begins with like a major terrorist attack in London or some kind of major bombing in London, and then the disappearance of or the seeming murder of one of the members of the Slow Horses at Slough House, and how that doesn't seem to happen, and something big is going on with a plot involving mistaken identities and trying to make it look like someone is dead who's not dead, because so he can go investigate. And it's one of these shows where Oldman is sort of there shambling around until the last scene of the first episode, when he blows the the back wall of the theater off with just like 4 lines, when his character completely shifts. And that's a great show. If you haven't watched it, you probably don't need to watch previous seasons, though that you should. Maybe not the third season one wasn't the best, but anyway, that's Slow Horses. Then I watched The Perfect Couple on Netflix, which is another one of these 6-episode whodunit mysteries where there's a body in the ocean and you don't know who's dead, and it's a wedding, and the wedding's been ruined, and that's the end of that. And so Nicole Kidman's on that, and that was immensely fun, and I really enjoyed that. And then anyway, that would be those are the 2. There are a couple others I'll mention later in the week, but that's and Bad Monkey. That was on Apple TV. Bad Monkey with Vince Vaughn, Carl Hiaasen adaptation. To watch 2 episodes of it, and it's just incredibly fun.
It's good, right? I was right. That was a Seth recommends a couple weeks ago.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. So
it's good.
It's
catching up now. That was after a couple episodes, but now it's most the way through the series. Yeah.
Yeah. And Vaughn is just like that guy, what he can do with a line reading, just an ordinary line reading, how he can just sort of like spike a scene up or sort of like just take it to a slightly different comic level is just, it's kind of
there are interviews with people who are working with him on that show, the other actors, and a lot of them are young or not well known. And so they're having their first experience working with someone like Vince, and they can't believe what he can do. And they talk a lot about how he's really an improv guy up there, which is I don't think how people think of him as an actor. You don't picture him as like a character on The Office or something. But they're talking about how you kind of have to stay on your toes when you're filming with him, because he has this instinct about line or just a look or a direction to send things, as if he's the director and the actor, a player coach. And it's
okay, and Seth, you have a novel to recommend.
Yes, I would like to recommend Taffy Brodesser-Akner's Long Island Compromise. This is her second big novel. She had a few years ago a very popular book called Fleischman is in Trouble, and it was made into a Hulu series, a limited series and adaptation. This one is Long Island Compromise. It's about a Jewish family that is wealthy, and the father is kidnapped early on and held for ransom at his own factory and then released. And everybody thinks that they've sort of moved on, and the father especially. And it just the way it haunts this Jewish family for generations to come. And, they're not a religious family, but they are haunted by this idea of the Dybbuk, which is, the famous, the sort of unrested soul that, takes over people and, has to accomplish things and solve problems that they didn't solve during their life here, or whatever, however you interpret it. But the whole novel is really about this sort of the fear of the Dybbuk, and the Dybbuk sort of moving from character to character. They're generally successful people, the children of this family, but they go through life thinking that the wealth has destroyed them and worrying that the wealth has destroyed them. And they find out that the people around them in this Long Island town and beyond resent them for the wealth. And what you learn through the book, something I really enjoyed, is that it's never really clear whether it's worse to be the rich family or the family that resents the rich family. That's kind of a running theme in this book, which is that, your resentment of them, and people, as you go along in the book and you'll read and you'll see people do things based on that. They act out based on that resentment, and things happen.
Right. So this book is based on a true story happened to Taffy's family. She's a friend of mine, a fellow her kid is in the same grade as my kid at school, and was, before she became a novelist, easily the best celebrity profile writer in the country at the New York Times, and this evocation of there was this kind of spate of weird crimes around New York in the 1970s where rich businessmen were getting kidnapped by people who worked for them, or people. It was very odd. Now basically it's like daily life in Brazil and Mexico. But there was this moment in the 70s when it started happening here. 3 or 4 cases. This was a famous case that she has now turned into this novel. So that's Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser Akner. And as I say, we're talking here about Bad Monkey, Slow Horses, and The Perfect Couple, all of which very, very much worth seeing. A Perfect Couple on Netflix, Bad Monkey on Apple TV Plus, and wait, what was the third? And Slow Horses also on Apple TV Plus. Okay, so we will be back tomorrow. I want to remind you. So tomorrow, of course, is the morning of the debate. We will be doing an emergency podcast after the debate, so you will be able to hear that probably around midnight Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and that will suffice for our Wednesday podcast. I should mention, because I think people will be very interested to know this, that I just read that tomorrow, before the House, if you go to C-SPAN, you can probably watch it, Andrew Cuomo apparently is going to be testifying about the COVID response in New York State and his legendary, horrible policy of making people, stay in nursing homes. And this is going to be kind of an interesting key moment, because Cuomo is planning a political comeback, and he has a huge potential opening if he performs well. I don't know how he can, but the New York mayoralty race next year has now been thrown into chaos because 5 or 6 different people right in the proximity of Eric Adams, the mayor, have had their phones seized, and there are multiple investigations, and things are not looking good for Adams, and that could really be an open seat next year. And Cuomo has $15 million in the bank and is already positioning himself to run as a centrist candidate in the race. And so this what he does tomorrow, if he can hold his temper and show himself, make some argument for himself, could be very helpful, or it could be the end of that ambition if he blows himself up on the launch.
And he'll be asked about China, right? We had the explosive story last week about the advisor most of it was about Kathy Hochul because she's in office now, but the advisor was also part of.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Kathy's son, right, who was his advisor and who it turns out was a Chinese spy. So anyway, that's an interesting political story tomorrow that you can maybe make plans to check up on during the day before the debate. So we'll be back tomorrow morning. For Seth, Abe, Christine, and Madam, John Podhoretz, keep the candle burning.